Come, come, ye saints, no toil nor labor fear, but with joy wend your way.
Welcome. We're so excited to have you all here at our second annual Salt Lake City Mormon Stories Conference. It's really fun to see everybody. My name is Katrina Anderson. I will be conducting this first session today. I'd like to thank everyone for being here, for supporting this community. This past year and a half that I've been a part of the Mormon Stories community, I've made some of the best friends of my life. We've had book groups, we've had play dates, we've had lunches and dinners and service projects and barbecues. We've laughed together and we've cried together a few times. I've shared my story and I've listened to your story. And one of my buns is unbuttoned. That's embarrassing. There we go. I have found some of my people here in this crazy and marvelous state of Utah. We come from different families and different places, but the one thing we all have in common is that we are each on a journey, where our own Mormon story is still being spun. For many of us, this is a journey filled with hills and forks and crossroads. Maybe the path looks long and straight before us. Maybe we are clearing new paths through tall grass and weeds, searching for a trail that feels right. Often traversing these new paths can feel very lonely. But each of us here today is lucky. We're lucky because we found Mormon Stories. We found this community who understands. And that is a miracle when your whole world has been turned upside down. Historically, Mormons have not always been great at creating spaces where people of different beliefs can meet together and safely express themselves. This community aims to create that space. We hope that this conference will allow for a safe, authentic expression. We know that differences of belief can foster conflict in families and friendships online. I think many of us have seen that. We want this community and this conference to be free of that conflict, a place where we can put aside the cultural notion that we must all agree on belief and practice in order to enjoy a common, safe space. Any one community member's expression of belief or practice does not necessarily indicate that other community members share that belief or endorse that practice. When needed, we can simply agree to disagree and choose to enjoy others' expressions, even if they do not match our own. I'd like to direct you to the back of your program where we have a list of the shared values statement for Mormon Stories, and I'm just gonna read that list. 1, we acknowledge the richness of Mormon heritage, teachings, and community in all of its diversity. We believe that one can self-identify as Mormon based on one's genealogy, upbringing, beliefs, relationships, and other life experiences, regardless of one's adherence or not adherence to the teachings or doctrines of any religious organization. I didn't say 2, but now we're on to 3. 3 is we seek spaces where we as Mormons can live lives of intellectual and spiritual integrity, individual conscience, and personal dignity. 4, we acknowledge and honor different spiritual paths and modes of religious or non-religious truth-seeking. We respect the convictions of those who subscribe to ideas and beliefs that differ from our own. 5, we recognize the confusion, distress, emotional trauma, and social ostracism that people on faith journeys often experience. We seek constructive ways of supporting people regardless of their ultimate decisions regarding church affiliation or activity. 6, we affirm the inherent and equal worth of all human beings. We seek spaces where Mormons and all people can interact as equals, regardless of race, gender, or sexual orientation. In this spirit of egalitarianism, we prefer non-authoritarian and non-hierarchical means of organization and affiliation. I also want to take the chance now to just thank everybody who volunteered, who showed up early, who has been a part of putting this conference together. And I'm going to read a list of names, which means that I probably forgot somebody, so I apologize. First of all, just everyone whose name appears on this program, you're awesome. Thank you for participating, for performing and speaking today. And here's the list of names of people who helped out for this weekend. Lindsay Park, Whitney and Jeff Moulton, Sarah Smith, Letty Rockwell, Greg Walkwell, Jared Anderson, Chelsea Fife, Terry Wittenberg, Chelsea and Michael Archibald, Stephanie Nicolason, Lisette Smith, Meredith Lesor, and Richard Holdman. And of course, Anne and John. I don't even know where John is. Where is John? He's back there. Hi, John. Thank you for all you guys do for Mormon Stories. You guys are amazing. And everyone who helped out today. Now to the program. We are going to have our non-traditional prayer this afternoon, by Christy Sadira. And then following the prayer, we will have a musical performance by Peter Breinholt. And I'm going to give you guys a little intro on Peter because he deserves it. He has sold out every major concert hall in the state many times over. His credits include 6 albums, a concert DVD, guitar songbooks, film scores, Pearl Awards, songwriting awards, and concerts with several symphony orchestras and choirs, including the Motab. So we feel so honored to have Peter here today, and he'll be performing twice, but his first song is called Jerusalem, right after Christy's prayer.
Before I offer this prayer, I thought it'd be nice if you could join hands and perhaps close your eyes and take a couple deep meditative breaths. As we gather together on this beautiful morning, we invoke the divine within the universe and within ourselves. May this day be blessed with gifts, lessons, understanding, and friends. May we feel the pulse of all creation within us, and may our energy be a gift to all we encounter. Open our spirits to awareness that we may be filled with deeper understanding. Help us to listen, to understand true motivations, and to recognize and follow the best path for us, knowing that we are each on this earth to have our own experience and have our own path to follow. May we live in gratitude for life and for living. May our lives be of service to our Mother Earth. May we open our senses to the needs of those around us. May we be a joy to the sorrowful, a sea for the thirsty, a balm for the suffering, a home for the stranger, a haven for the distressed, and a defender for the victims of oppression. Let integrity and uprightness distinguish all of our acts as we show strength in spirit, courage in action, and gentleness in heart. Let us act in wisdom, conquer fear and doubt, and face each day with hope and joy as we discover all of our hidden gifts and find and live out our authentic selves. May we come to know that place within one another in which the entire universe dwells, the place of love, truth, light, and peace. For when we honor this place within each other, it is then that we become one. Haribol, Shalom, Amen, a woman, Namaste.
We're happy to be here, the three of us. When I got invited to do this, I thought of 2 people who would absolutely love to be at this conference. Not to perform, but to listen. And so I brought them both along. We got Mike Ensign over here on my left and Mike Waterman over here on my right. And the thing about this trio, we've been playing together for about 20 years, off and on. When we get together once in a while to rehearse, we spend about an hour rehearsing, playing music, and then about 3 hours talking about life. And so it's really great for us. We're all fans of Mormon Stories, so we're happy to be here. So we lay here to rest, and so we lay here with the ground beneath our heads. Not a word among us has been said, my little child. And now the dogs are barking tonight, and now the men will bargain as they settle beneath the lights. Everything gets colder here at night, my little child. I've never been so worn and weary. I've never missed my love so dearly. My little child. I cannot forget the things I saw. I cannot forget the way they gathered in the halls, and standing all alone before them all, my little child. Yeah. Somewhere there is laughter tonight. Somewhere there is singing in a choir in the light, but it's quiet in Jerusalem tonight. It's quiet in Jerusalem tonight. It's quiet in Jerusalem tonight, my little child. I've never been so worn and weary. I've never missed my love so dearly. My little child. So we lay here to rest, and so we lay here with the ground beneath our heads, and not a word among us has been said, my little child. My little child. My little child. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. I loved it. Okay. Our first speaker today is Jana Riess. She is the author or editor of 9 books, including Flunking Sainthood, a 2011 book about failing at 12 different spiritual practices, and it's wonderful. I read it. And it's available for sale here today. She is also currently working on the Twible, a 3-year Twitter project with humorous daily Bible updates. She has a bachelor's degree from Wellesley College, a master's degree in theology from the Princeton Theological Seminary, and a PhD in American Religious Studies from Columbia University. Jana is a religion and American studies professor at Miami University in Ohio. She and her husband live in Cincinnati, and she also claims her spiritual director is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Following Jana, Peter will be doing another performance, and then we'll go to that point. Welcome, Jana.
So it's a testimony to what an idiot I am that Peter came to speak to me and introduce himself a few minutes before he sang, and I said, "What do you do?" I'm so sorry. That was amazing. So some of you know that I converted to Mormonism when I was in seminary, and that I went to seminary to become a Presbyterian minister, and I left seminary neither Presbyterian nor a minister. Since 2008, I've been working at Westminster John Knox, which is the publishing house of the Presbyterian Church. So today, I feel like my worlds are coming together. It's a thrill for me to find myself in a pulpit in a Presbyterian church. This is actually what I went to school for, and I never actually get to do this, so it's kind of a thrill. So in Presbyterian tradition, I decided to preach from a text. That's what Presbyterians do. Last summer, a man contacted me who read an interview that I had done with an evangelical blog about why I am a Mormon. He wanted to friend me on Facebook, but then also wanted to criticize how I represent myself on Facebook. By the way, did you know that your faith is not listed on your public viewable info page on Facebook? He asked me. Under religion, my public profile just says Micah 6:8, my favorite verse, which is, "What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God?" This reader questioned my use of Micah and seemed to think that I was masking my Mormon identity. "Would it be so hard," he asked, "to list the name of our church and then perhaps add that verse as a tagline?" I wrote back to thank him for seeking me out, because I always write back to thank people for seeking me out, and if a serial killer ever stalks me, I will thank him for seeking me out. But I defended my position. Micah 6:8, I said, encapsulated my faith better than any label ever could. Why is that verse so critical for me? Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. How much more basic can we get? These are words I aim to live by, words that I've come to love because of my own history, my story. And today, as we gather here, I'm wondering, what is it in your story that has brought you to this place? It's been my privilege to hear from many Mormons and former Mormons who write to me now just because of that snarky opening anecdote. I really do like to hear from readers. Don't want to give you the wrong impression. And I'm most touched when they want to share their stories with me. Sometimes people who are either in or out of the church have stories of pain. Many of you have been hurt, sometimes deeply. Some of you feel that you have been lied to, whether this is about specific things in LDS history or doctrine, or more the kind of general if this, then that formula that all religions try to teach, that if we live a certain way and we don't deviate from a carefully laid out path, then our lives will be happy. And some of you just sound tired. So raise your hand if this is you. Tired of being that person in Sunday school who says, "Yes, but..." Any takers? Yep. Tired of worrying about the bizarre gender messages your daughters are receiving in a church that insists, on the one hand, that yes, that girls are equal, even preternaturally splendiferous, but then removes from them any administrative or ecclesiastical authority, yes. Or maybe you're tired of trying to convince people that you didn't actually choose to be gay and have your family shun you and be discriminated against under the law because you thought that would be super fun. So you're tired, and sometimes you're angry. So the first thing I want to talk about is doing justice. When Micah was a prophet, back in the 8th century BCE, he was particularly concerned with defending the rights of those who had been trampled on, not just by corrupt governments, but even by the religious establishment that was supposed to protect them. Micah felt that religious folks were doing their fair share of the trotting on these downtrodden people. Today in North America, we're seeing some of this happening. In the Roman Catholic Church right now, nuns have been publicly chastised and stripped of their financial oversight because in the Vatican's eyes, they have been wayward. They've been feeding the poor, supporting universal health care and equal rights for women. This is dangerous stuff. To some of us in this room, the LDS Church hasn't always been on the side of justice. It's a rough place to be gay. It has a difficult past with race relations, a past that still sometimes bleeds into the present. And this year, I've been very concerned about the church's investment of an eye-popping 8-figure sum into a luxury shopping mall here in Salt Lake City. I don't think that that is what it means to do justice. I love the church and I want it to have a secure future, so I understand the need to invest some of its resources. But a mall that upholds such conspicuous consumption when 16,000 children will starve to death today is very hard to defend in the eyes of that guy. I've been called naive for this view, and maybe it is naive to suggest that a church that bears the name of Jesus Christ should emphasize saving poor people's lives rather than enabling rich people to shop at Tiffany's. But I will continue to speak my mind because I believe in doing justice. And sometimes we all need reminders of how best to accomplish that. I struggle with materialism and knowing how much is too much for a disciple of Jesus. In American society, it can be very difficult to get any perspective at all on that question. On the flight out here last night, I was listening to the beautiful soundtrack for the movie A World Apart, which was a drama that was released in 1988, back when I was in college. During those years in the late 1980s and early 1990s, apartheid was the issue of the day. Students protested that our college should divest its holdings from South Africa, a nation in which a small minority of affluent whites held all the power. Something had to give. I was sympathetic to the cause, but often too absorbed in my own preoccupations to be terribly involved. It seemed so far away. That changed just a few years later because of a friend. When I was in seminary, one of my closest friends was a student from South Africa. I should say he is now a Presbyterian pastor, so one of us at least is out doing what we're supposed to do from our education. Bovi had grown up poor and black in Pretoria, and I loved to hear the stories of his childhood, which was so different from mine. I had never known oppression, never struggled under a yoke I could not remove. One story that Bovi told me has stayed with me. When he was a teenager, he had the honor of being selected to travel with some other students from South Africa to Lesotho, which is a tiny country that's entirely surrounded by, but independent from, South Africa. And one day in Lesotho, he was walking down the street, and he heard someone shouting, "Mandela! Mandela!" And from the commotion, he thought that Mandela was actually there in the street in Lesotho rather than breaking rocks in a prison on Robben Island, which is where he actually was. It wasn't really Mandela, it was just a picture of him being sold by a street vendor in a stall. Although Bovi had grown up hearing the stories of Nelson Mandela in hushed and reverent tones, he had never seen a picture of this man. None of the students had. Mandela's image was banned in South Africa, so none of the kids had ever even gotten to see the man that they were told was to be their leader in justice. Now, less than a year after Bovi told me that story from his childhood, he went up to the South African consulate in New York to cast his vote for Nelson Mandela for president of South Africa. A group of South African students and one beloved professor, black and white together, rented a van to travel up to cast their votes. One night that week, a jubilant Bovi came over to our apartment for dinner and told me about the joy of that whole experience. And at the time, we had a Cocker Spaniel who had all black fur, so we named her Halila, which in Hebrew is the night. And Halila, in her Cocker Spaniel spastic exuberance, began jumping on Bovie, and he caught her paws and he said, "Mandela is the president. He is black like you." Which was one of the most joyful moments of my life. So all of these memories passed through my mind last night on the airplane when I was listening to the score from A World Apart. It contains a stirring rendition of the song that was the voice of protest in the fight against apartheid. At the time the film came out, that fight sometimes seemed hopeless. Power and wealth were so firmly entrenched in the hands of a few Afrikaners that real democracy seemed impossible. But just a few years later, the world had shifted. Justice had triumphed. That protest song, forged in suffering, had become the anthem of an entire nation. I almost cut this whole story from my talk this morning when I read it over and I realized that it sounds like I am trying to equate the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with a very oppressive political system. I want to be really clear that that's not what I'm saying at all. I just want to communicate that some of us have experienced pain at the hands of the church. There are many things about the church that I'd like to change, but there is no comparison. I bring up Bovie because he's an example of how I've been blessed to witness change in my lifetime. Change that I hoped for, but did not expect. What's more, the miracle was that this transformation happened without war or bloody revolution. The world, if even just for a moment, trended toward justice. The new government of South Africa sought to combine justice and mercy with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which became a place for those who had been horribly wronged to tell their stories in the presence of their perpetrators. But rather than retaliation, which would be human and very understandable, there was mercy. This is the second thing that Micah is trying to communicate to us. Love mercy, he says. What strikes me about this juxtaposition between justice and mercy is that I think Micah understood how easy it is for us to allow ourselves the pleasure of righteous indignation. It feels really good to be right. When Micah said that we should love mercy and practice humility, I don't think he was only saying that we should help the persecuted, though that's part of it. I think he was also noting that we are required to love the ones that we see as perpetrators. This is a hard, hard truth to anyone who has been wronged by injustice. And please note that I am never suggesting that anyone should stop working for justice or stop exposing injustice. We have to do that in order to create a better world. Battered women should not return to abusive husbands just because they want to be merciful and humble. But it's our task to balance those things, justice and mercy, so that the cause of justice is advanced, but we aren't puffed up in anger. Personally, I find this to be a tricky path. I'm the sort of person who gets very passionate about justice, sometimes to the exclusion of mercy. My view of God has been very influenced by the teachings of liberation theology, which finds God not in established religions or institutions as much as in people, especially people who suffer. The Bible and the Book of Mormon, to me, are both texts that I see as trending toward justice, Sword of Laban notwithstanding. I heard a great talk earlier this year by Walter Brueggemann, who is an Old Testament scholar and theologian I admire. And he pointed out something I've never noticed before about the book of Exodus. If you look all through the book, the name of Pharaoh is never given. We don't know who he was. Now, loads of people throughout history have tried to come up with this theory or that one to explain who might have been Pharaoh at that particular time in history. But Brueggemann says they're missing the point, which is discovered only when we look at who is named in the story. Right at the beginning of Exodus, Some midwives are commanded to kill all of the baby Hebrew boys that are born. They quietly refuse to carry out the order, and they lie to Pharaoh about this resistance, saying that the Hebrew women are just so robust that by the time the midwives arrive on the scene, the baby boys have been spirited away. Those midwives had names. I can't actually pronounce them, but they have names. Probably Shiphrah and Puah. Now, it's not a coincidence that the Bible goes out of its way to name these midwives, these lowly women who became saviors of an entire people, while utterly ignoring which Pharaoh was which. It's a signal that everything to come in the book of Exodus will be about the upending of worldly power. Pharaohs are going to come and go, and one is so much like another that it hardly bears mentioning. But God is on the side of the oppressed, and the oppressed have names. I love that story, and sometimes I can see myself in it as a doer of justice. But there's another part of me that is Pharaoh. Part of loving mercy, as Micah enjoins us to do, is remembering that we all have at least a little bit of Pharaoh in us. As we share our stories of pain here today, which is a very important part on the path to justice, we can also remember that just having the privilege of gathering here today to talk about injustice is a privilege afforded only to those people who have pretty comfortable lives. We are midwives and we are pharaohs. Part of loving mercy and walking humbly, the third part of Micah's equation, is remembering that we are not always in the right. But it is so hard to practice that kind of humility and questioning our own motives all of the time when we're surrounded by people who seem so very certain that they are in the right. Those people drive me up a tree. And what's more, LDS culture encourages this kind of fixation with certainty and obedience. I've spoken before about my concern with the spiritual ramifications of an institutional church's insistence that it alone is an oasis of truth in a sea of half-truths. I worry when the church wants its members not only to see it as true, but as the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. This encourages an all-or-nothing approach to truth. What happens in that dichotomous situation is the kind of story I keep hearing over and over again as I do preliminary interviews for a book I'm researching about growing up Mormon. A common theme is that kids who grow up taught that kind of certainty is the only way to experience true religion have nowhere to go when there's so much as a chink in the armor. They follow the script they have been given, and they leave. Most people of faith discover at some point in their experience that they will have cognitive dissonance, that disconnect when what they can see and observe with their own eyes is at odds with what they've been taught to believe. One response is denial, or a knee-jerk rejection of any new truth that conflicts with the old. We have to always keep in mind that cognitive dissonance is scary stuff. Sometimes my own blog is a source of cognitive dissonance for some of my fellow Mormons. And it's not just my opinions that some conservative Mormons find alarming. Sometimes it's actually facts, verifiable facts, that they insist could not possibly be true. There's no room in their minds for some of the complexities those facts might raise, and so they won't assimilate them. Now, on my more mature days, when I consider such people and how they lash out at new ideas in their own obvious anxiety and pain, I try to compare their fear about changes in Mormonism to how I felt that terrible day in 2006, when it was announced that Pluto would no longer be a planet. I went through all 5 stages of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's various stages of grief, if you will indulge me. Stage 1, denial. What do they mean Pluto's no longer a planet? Pluto has always been a planet. My whole life, Pluto has been a planet. Pluto is in the planet song we learned in grade school. You can't can't sing that song anymore if you end it with Uranus. That doesn't even rhyme. Of course, Pluto is still a planet. Stage 2, anger. That is not fair. Who do they think they are? These fancy astronomers with their fancy degrees. And oh no, that's just a dwarf. It's not a real planet. Jerks. Pseudo-intellectuals. We don't need them. Stage 3, bargaining. I'm just sure that if Pluto were given one more chance to beef up with protein shakes or something, that it could totally dominate its neighboring moons the way that a real planet is supposed to. It just needs some time. We need to give Pluto some time to grow. Stage 4, depression. Pluto is a dwarf forever cast into outer darkness, not just metaphorically, but also literally. Planeta non grata. Stage 5, acceptance. No, I'm not there yet. I'm still not over it. Disclaimer from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, not all stages of grief will be experienced by all patients. Clearly, I have a lot invested in the concept of Pluto. It has always been my favorite planet, and if it turns out that all of the speculative theology is true, and we each get to be a god of our own planet, I totally call Pluto. It's mine. I bring this up just to point out that the first response to cognitive dissonance is often a negative one. Deny the new truth, shoot the messenger, eliminate any source of confusion or conflict. A second approach is for the person experiencing cognitive dissonance to give up and disappear. Some of you in this room have chosen this route, at least for now. One woman wrote to me recently about the hopelessness she felt. She was feeling like she was banging her head against the wall, praying for things to change in the LDS church. It grieves me terribly to hear those stories because the church is so much lesser without her and without many of you. I grieve those stories, but I do understand them. Now, the third response is the one I would like to work toward myself: openness to and assimilation of change. So in my last few minutes, I want to suggest a few strategies for Mormons in and out of the church who are serious about doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly. Now, I'm talking about the church, lowercase c, which is the great cloud of witnesses that includes anyone and everyone who has a stake in making Mormonism lovely and of good report. As we strive to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly, let's aim for the following. Number 1, don't hide conflict. I don't think that this one is going to be that hard, actually, for many people in Mormon stories. So I've started you with an easy homework assignment. But it's not easy for everyone to be open and frank when they have disagreements in the Mormon universe. I've had people tell me, and perhaps they've told you too, it's okay if you have questions and doubts. That's fine, but it's not okay to talk about them or to write about them because you might lead other people astray. This is the response of a terrified person, one who is alarmed at losing control. Be compassionate about that person's fear, but also be honest about your issues and questions. The author of the book of Ephesians taught us to speak the truth in love. Both parts of that are hard, speaking the truth and doing so in love. But when we encourage people to keep their doubts private, to not raise them publicly lest others ask questions too, we not only do violence to those individual stories, but also to the truths of our religion. I believe that Mormonism offers me beautiful truths that I have not been able to find anywhere else. I believe strongly enough in that truth that I also know it never needs to be upheld by a lie. And discouraging people from voicing their truths is tantamount to a lie. So don't hide conflict or shove it under the rug. It will fester. It will become more destructive. Speak the truth in love, and both truth and love will grow. Number 2, listen deeply. It's getting harder now, your assignment. There are some people, though not very many, who are naturally good listeners. I think my husband is one of those people, and I wish the world had more people like him. I'm not like that. Listening is something I have to work very hard at doing. Unfortunately, I don't get a lot of support for this practice in the LDS Church. We are not a listening church. We teach our children to talk to God without listening, and then we wonder aloud why it is that they get to be adults and they don't hear God speaking. Shocker. We never trained them in spiritual discernment or how to hear God in the first place. We only trained them how to talk to God. This is also all too often how we treat each other. When someone comes in to see a bishop for counseling, the LDS default mode is to jump immediately to an action plan. In the best case scenario, this generates compassionate listening. It might also involve a referral to social services and an admission that the problems the church member is facing might require professional help. In other scenarios, the bishop proffers advice that he is not typically qualified to render, or a task list of hoops to jump through to cure the individual's questions or doubts. I worry about this because I've heard too many stories of people who've been harmed by bishops who could have contributed to healing if they had only listened. The church trains bishops in so many things. Why not listening? I was introduced to these basic skills in divinity school, and lest you think I'm holding myself up as an example here, I should tell you I basically sucked at those skills. Because they feel very unnatural without practice. Like the typical LDS bishop, I just wanted to fix things. Listening is much more challenging than fixing. So my seminary education often involved somewhat comical scenarios in which we applied the basic pastoral care concepts we learned in class into our daily lives. One of those was empathic listening, in which we would simply restate the observation or complaint of the person we were talking to without introducing evaluative judgments or an action plan. So what I hear you saying is, you are not happy with the spaghetti and meatballs we're having for dinner. Or, so what I hear you saying is you'd like to introduce liturgical dance into sacrament meeting. This phrase became a standard joke to us because it was just so overused. But how much better is it to have the language of listening be overused than not used at all? How much would things change if the Mormon rank and file felt truly heard? I was very heartened to learn of the wonderful model of Elder Marlon Jensen simply attending an event, I think it was in Berkeley, where else, in which he simply listened to the stories of homosexual members of the church. He wasn't there to be a celebrity or a speaker, just a steward of people's pain. What I've been made to understand about that event is that one by one, as gay members and former members of the LDS Church told their stories, Elder Jensen listened. But if we want representatives of the institutional church, big C, to listen to us, little c's, then the people of the ecclesia, the lowercase c church, have to listen too. So our homework assignment is to make it a priority to practice deep empathic listening to someone in authority. Their lives are sometimes very hard, and their responsibilities burdensome. As I think back on all the friends that I made when I was in seminary, who are now pastors, they all have incredible support systems. It's hard enough to be a pastor, and many people burn out at it. But, they have days off. They have groups of pastors in their cities with whom they can be completely open and honest about what's really going on. Bishops have nothing like that. My friends who are bishops are some of the loneliest people I know. They need to be listened to, too. Number 3, pray together often. So pretty much any time I speak before a Mormon audience, you can expect that at some point I'm going to sneak onto my usual soapbox and wax on about how we don't know how to pray together. So here I go. If we really want to become a people who do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly, let's take a lesson from you too. We get to carry each other. When I converted to Mormonism, I was dismayed by the total absence of any tradition of real group prayer. We don't have prayer groups or Bible studies where people pray out loud for one another. I can't tell you how deeply I miss this. When I went to the temple for the first time, almost a decade after I converted to Mormonism, one of the things I was excited to participate in was something called a prayer circle. Finally, now I understood the reason that we weren't doing this at the ward level is that it was going to be something special and sacred that we did in the temple. Oh my, was I disappointed. Suffice it to say that having a crocheted white box that has been stuffed with anonymous needs does not a church bind together. It's bizarre to me because our church does a wonderful job of training people in individual and family prayer. I think we really walk that walk. But we don't extrapolate from that if the family that prays together stays together, maybe it's true for the congregation as well. In our church, we have absolutely no models for meaningful, non-formulaic corporate prayer. We're starving for them, and we don't even know it. So if you are interested in prayer, your third homework assignment is to find at least someone that you trust, one person, who's not a family member, and pray out loud with that person. It's going to feel awkward at first, but just try it. Tell each other your needs, your issues and concerns, and then pray out loud about whatever needs the person just voiced. And number 4, look for Christ in all people. This last assignment is a lifelong endeavor. We will be able to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly only when we can see the light of Christ in everyone. Some people really make you hunt for it. Those people are extra blessings. If you've read Flunking Sainthood, you might remember that one of the spiritual practices that I tried was hospitality, Benedictine hospitality, welcoming the stranger as Christ. The Benedictines take literally that line from Matthew 25, that when we receive someone with a cup of water, etc., we are actually receiving Christ in disguise. It's really hard to live that way. Last night on the plane, this guy came and I was thinking I'd have the middle seat and I could kind of stretch out, and then he showed up. I'm like, I'm supposed to think that you're Jesus. It's tough. I want to end with the last stanza of a beloved poem, As Kingfishers Catch Fire. It's by Jared Manley Hopkins, the 19th century English poet and Jesuit priest. Please forgive the lack of inclusive language here. I would normally change it, but it ruins the rhyme. So after spelling out in gorgeous detail the many places where we can see and find Christ in nature, Hopkins then turns to a more dubious source of finding God in flawed, flesh and blood human beings. He says, I say more, the just man justices, keeps grace, that keeps all his goings graces, acts in God's eye what in God's eye he is, Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the features of men's faces. Whatever your faith transitions, may you become the just person justicing. May you find Christ in 10,000 places. Thank you.
Come, come, ye saints, no toil nor labor fear, but with joy wend your way. Though hard to you this journey may appear, grace shall be as your day.